I know this is gonna sound like bullshit, but this story actually happened to my cousin and I in the summer of 2018. We lived pretty close to one another in the suburbs of Detroit. Both love photography and taking long drives listening to music. So that's exactly what we did on this particular day. We drove about an hour north to a small town and found an abandoned barn that was also for sale. At the time, we didn't spot any trespassing signs, so we decided to be adventurous and go check it out. Big mistake. The barn was in semi-decent condition, although the paint had begun to peel off. Structurally, it was pretty sound though, so I didn't feel uneasy about going in. I'm an avid urban explorer, and I'd been in far worse buildings. Once we got inside, we somehow ended up in the basement of this barn. I immediately was getting some weird-ass vibes. There's little girl clothes, toys, and furniture littered throughout the basement of this barn. I thought it was creepy as hell, and so did my cousin. Before I continue, behind the barn was a pretty decent-sized cornfield. This cornfield backed up right to the barn, so we decided to be artsy and take a few pics from inside the corn stalks. I snap a few shots of my cousin, and then we decide it's time to head back to the car. Walking through the first row of corn on my way back to my cousin's car, I see a vertebrae in the dirt. At this point, I stop dead in my tracks in disbelief. Like, is this actually what I think it is, or is this an animal bone of some kind? I start looking around and fuck. There were several more. They were way too big to be deer. I yell for my cousin, who was almost back to the car at this point, and ask her to come take a look. We both start really examining the ground, and we find more and more bones. Now, for the record, I've taken a cadaver lab and human anatomy class in college, so I'm very familiar with the human body. We found a fibula and a fully intact femur. That's when I really started to freak the fuck out. We decided to call the cops because we knew this was serious. We wait in the car for a good 15 minutes, totally freaking out until the cops finally arrived. Once they came, there were two of them. We all started looking through the corn, as well as a nearby trash pile. I really don't think the cops believed us at first, and I distinctly remember them saying that they thought it was a deer carcass. That was until I found a full fucking ribcage in the trash pile, and that's when they changed their tune real quick. The cops then told us they would need us to leave, and that they were calling a full forensic team out there to start collecting evidence. We left totally shaken up. On the way out, I did see a no trespassing sign, and I'm sure the cops did too, but at this point, I don't think they cared. We gave the cops our information, but we never did hear anything back from them. I also watched the news pretty closely for the next few weeks, and didn't see anything either. This was definitely one of the most creepiest things I've ever experienced. And I also do have a photo from the barn I'd be happy to share, but it doesn't show any of the remains. About 2 years ago, my friends and I had found an abandoned insane asylum located in Downey, California. Being the curious 17-year-olds that we were, we decided it'd be a good idea to go explore this abandoned facility, just to see what we could find inside. So on a Saturday night, we gathered a few more of our friends and made the drive out to Downey so we could explore this building for ourselves. After about 30 minutes of driving, we arrive inside Downey and make our way through the city to where the asylum is located. The closer we get, the shadier and shadier neighborhoods we're passing through become. And after another 15 minutes of driving, we finally arrive at our destination. Park the car, climb through a hole in the fence, and make our way into the building to see what we could find. To be honest, it started out not being too bad, considering we had around 10 people. We were thinking, what's the worst thing that could happen to a group of 10 people? So we meander through the building, looking at all the broken furniture scattered throughout the rooms, the patient files thrown up on the floor, and we're all just pretty much having a good time looking throughout what once was a fully operating mental institution. But this is where shit gets weird. As we're walking, we of course had a flashlight pointed down the hallway, because the power that once was in this building was and is clearly gone. But as we're walking with our flashlight pointed ahead of us, we come to a corner. We see the adjacent wall of a corner light up from what we assume was another flashlight. And sure enough, we turn the corner and there's another group of 4 kids. Shady, weird fucking kids. We confront one another and ask us if we've been to the slide. We politely answer no because we have no idea what they're talking about, and they tell us that we should follow them. Of course, we decline because we're getting weird vibes from these people, and they're talking amongst themselves, when one of the kids comes up to me with, I kid you not, a solid 6-inch long Bowie knife. Isn't this cool? Look what I found. As he moves the knife closer to my face, I politely answer, what a cool find that is. And we start to back away, telling them that we were going to go explore the roof of the building. Surprisingly enough, they say alright, and they turn the corner and continue on their way. Now that that was out of the way, I'm seriously beginning to feel weird about this entire place, and how we're definitely not supposed to be here. So at that point, I say fuck it, we need to go to the roof. Go down the fire escape and get out of here. We make our way up there, and we're sitting there plotting our escape. Like I said, people are not supposed to be in the asylum, so they have a police car stationed at the main gate to make sure no one comes in. So as we're up there, we try to figure out the best path to get out of here without getting noticed by the police. That's when my friend sees a fire escape ladder coming down off of his higher portion of the roof. We decide that this is probably our best option, so we grab the small ladder that will be able to boost us up onto this higher portion of the roof. My friend Jonah goes up and immediately turns around so that he could help other people out by pulling them up. As I'm getting myself up there, my heart completely fucking sinks. Jonah, did you not see this when you got up here? I whisper. What the fuck are you talking about, man? He responds. I'm looking forward, and he slowly turns to see what was pretty much our worst fucking nightmare. There's about 15 hooded people sitting in a circle up there, surrounding a burning cat or some other dead animal. They're all talking in tongues and making noises which seem satanic. As we're both getting down, we notice that they start talking amongst themselves in this weird language. And as soon as we get down, they stand up and start sprinting towards us. I tell everyone to ditch the idea of the fire escape and not to worry about the cop. We need to get the fuck out of here. So we all start sprinting throughout this building with this cult close in pursuit. We miraculously make it out of the building, and they're starting to run across the field to the main gate. And as we're doing so, the cop notices all the commotion, turns on his sirens, and comes driving in. Thank God he managed to cut off the cult from us, and he starts chasing them as we get to safety. Honestly, I can say it was definitely the scariest experience of my life. I don't know what we could have done if they'd taken one of our friends. Would we have gone back in and confront them? I don't know. I'm glad that definitely didn't happen. This happened at the very end of summer that just passed. A little backstory. About a year ago, two of my exploring buddies decided to explore a huge abandoned brewery. It had many sections and buildings to it that were split on opposite sides of an abandoned property. There was a main building on the right side of the train tracks, and on the left was the manufacturing and bottling buildings of said brewery. The first time we explored this place, we were only able to explore the side of the brewery that was on the left side of the tracks. It was still a very large area, but not even close to as massive as the area was to explore on the right-hand side of the tracks. Our first explore of the smaller section of the brewery was perfect. There was minimal graffiti, no security, and nothing even remotely creepy took place. It was excellent. We tried to make our way into the main building, through at least 3 or 4 covered bridges and tunnels, but we found all were locked up tight and impossible to get through. We decided that was enough exploring for that day, and went home believing the place was completely explored, since there was no way into the larger section of the buildings on the right-hand side. A few months after that, I came upon a post online that showed pictures inside that main and much larger building of the brewery. Right after I saw that, I knew we had to go back and complete the explore. I figured in the months that we had passed from our previous exploration, someone had gone in with bolt cutters and opened up more ways into the main buildings. I tried numerous times to get my buddies together, but our schedules just didn't seem to line up. Another month passes, and I wanted to go back and explore that brewery so bad that I couldn't think about much else. I got tired of waiting for my friends that didn't seem too keen on exploring it. I contacted one of my other friends that was interested in urbex but had never done it. After a bit of planning, we finally set a day to explore those buildings of the brewery. We arrived on the property as the morning sun was still rising, and easily found a way into the main section. It was amazing. I saw so many things in there I had never seen in any of my other explores of the buildings that were even more cavernous than I could have even imagined. After me and my friend had been exploring the place for about an hour, we began to feel a bit uneasy. The first occurrence that spooked us pretty good was when we entered a very large room that was in fairly good shape about 4 floors up. It still had carpet and nice paint, and there was no graffiti. There was a small door all the way across the room that caught our attention, so we decided to see where it went. When we opened it, we were in a very dark hallway that was filled with massive storage tanks on both sides of the hallway. We took a few steps in, and we both stopped dead in our tracks by an echoing whistling tune. It was too complex and patchy to be a bird's call, and we couldn't quite tell where it was coming from because of the loud echoing. I turned quietly and asked my friend if he heard it, and I could see that I didn't even need to ask him since his eyes were round as saucers, and he had a shocked expression on his face. I motioned to him to quietly leave the hallway, and I followed him. Now this might seem kinda stupid, but I told him that we should keep exploring, but also avoid going further into the wing of the building we were currently in. My common sense was being overruled by my desire to explore. We looked around for another 2 hours before finally finding our way into a large office building that was the last building on the property we hadn't explored yet. This is where it got creepy again. We started seeing more and more clothing on the floor, and I suspected if the homeless were going to live anywhere, it would definitely be this building. It was in fairly good shape and was the furthest away from any entrance to the brewery complex, since the way we got in was through an underground tunnel. I rounded a corner at the end of the hallway, and the first smell that hit me was cigarette smoke. Not the cigarette smoke you'd smell after lingering into the walls and carpets, but the cigarette smell that was just smoke within 10 minutes of us getting there. And this definitely made both of us feel very uneasy. We both decided to push forward to explore just a little more of the building, since I had been looking forward to this for months and months. We were so close to completing the explore. We made our way to the second floor, and I became convinced that people were living inside. I poked my head into a room and saw a pile of clothing, shoes that looked fairly new, and some food on an old office desk. Nothing was in that particular room, but at certain times throughout the building, we could both hear faint shuffling noises. And that was enough for me and my buddy to call it quits. We explored the whole complex despite being very creeped out at times, and decided staying any longer and looking for any more rooms we missed wasn't really worth the risk. On our way out, we found even more food, including a full moldy pizza and a large chicken breast that was still fresh. I really did love that explorer, and I believe it was the best yet. The location was so unique and massive. It was definitely my favorite location I've ever been exploring. But it's also a location I doubt I'll ever be revisiting. I think in both of our minds, it's not worth the risk. When it comes to strangers, I've been super lucky. I used to work for Red Cross, and I took public transportation all over the city, and would certainly have been screwed if not for the kindness of random people I met along the way. Even this encounter could be considered friendly, but it's so bizarre, I felt like it might suit the taste of Let's Not Meet. I'm a paranormal buff, but more of an I want to believe, rather than just a believer. At the age of 12, however, there was no doubt in my mind that ghosts were real. So when they announced that the old children's wing of the Whitby Psychiatric was being torn down to make way for housing, I was convinced it was the perfect time to do a little urban exploring. Today, I'm more angered by the fact that Liza Homes put their shitty townhomes all over this historic site. Since my mother is a badass, she agreed to take me and my best friend to the Whitby Psych after school. By the time we arrived, it was probably around 5 p.m. or so. I was really excited by all the buildings, and had to restrain myself from running blindly into the first one I saw. Mom said she really didn't want us to go inside due to structural issues, which I found hugely disappointing. It was at this point a guy appeared. like some kind of character introduction from a movie. He sort of sidestepped out from one of the buildings and did a little wave before coming over to our group. He was thin and looked to be in his early 20s.
You guys here to check out the site? I know the area pretty well. I can give you a tour if you want.
I was immediately like, yes, please. But my mom and friend were a bit more apprehensive. My mom later told me that she had sized him up and knew she could take him easily before agreeing to the tour. He took us through every building, told us their history, discussed the hidden tunnels under the site, for all intents and purposes, acted like a professional guide. Along the way of this guy giving us the tour, I picked up on some unusual things about him. First, he was constantly hitting on my mother, kept asking all of our ages, and when we asked him his age, he always found something else to talk about. Second, he kept changing his name. And third, he'd mentioned that he'd practically lived on the premises and told us stories how he'd like to scare kids shitless who went inside the buildings. He was incredibly insistent that we don't go into the basement of one building. I wanted to see, positive that ghosts were everywhere, and it was there, but he got a bit angry at my eagerness. I only dropped the issue when my mom suggested it was probably unsafe. I remember him grinning at her, saying,
That's it. Exactly. Very dangerous.
Seems plausible, but surely the underground tunnels would have been far in worse condition, and he offered several times to take us there. An invitation we unanimously declined. After an hour and a half or so, it was getting dark, and we wanted to leave. He walked us to the car, which was the only one in the parking lot, and bid us, mostly my mom, a very good night. We asked how he planned on getting home, to which he responded,
Just gonna walk. I'm not far.
We figured he was talking about the subdivision that was relatively close by. Yet, as we pulled out of the parking lot, we saw him walking the opposite way up the road. Without trying to be dramatic, I have to point out there's only one thing on the other end of that road, and that's the still active portion of the Whitby Psych facility. I later learned from my aunt, who had been a nurse there, that they had been incredibly understaffed at the time. Due in part to this, it wasn't super rare for some patients to get out of the yard and wander the property before eventually returning themselves or being brought back by one of the guards that patrolled the area. Usually these patients were suffering from bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. It was definitely a bizarre situation that could have gone way worse. 11 years later, and I still wonder why he got so upset about the basement in that one building. Back in college, my friends and I got into the habit of exploring abandoned buildings. We've definitely seen some incredible places, and taken some pretty cool souvenirs from those places. I don't really condone taking stuff from buildings, but if it's about to be torn down, and the contractors have taken out everything they deem to be worth something, then I'll gladly take that depression glass they left behind. I digress. It's a small group of friends that goes exploring with me, and I love introducing new people to it. A friend of mine had asked me on several occasions if I could take him somewhere, because he'd never went exploring before. I decided to take him to an old paper factory that didn't have much inside, but had an absolutely beautiful view of the city from the roof. Also, it was incredibly easy to get in and out of. We went with a few other people. Two of my friends had decided to wait for us outside since they'd been in the building far too many times to find it interesting anymore. As we went to climb inside, a drunk couple came out. It's not really unusual. A lot of people like to use these buildings to smoke, drink, or paint in. We then asked if there were a lot more people inside. They said they thought it was mostly empty, but they heard someone banging around a few floors up, and that startled them out. They said he sounded angry and maybe we should avoid the roof. Since we weren't there to drink or anything, the roof was our only goal. We decided we'll take our chances and head up. After all, it's a massive building. Didn't think we would run into that guy. We walk up 10 flights of stairs, then climb the ladder to the roof. My friend is genuinely impressed, and the view, as always, is incredible. As we were about to head back down, my friend waiting on the street calls us. He says that a man passed out in the street. and the two of them had pulled him out of the way of traffic and into safety, and then called an ambulance. They suggest we waited out on the roof to avoid exiting the building while the cops are there. Neither of us can afford the $5,000 fine or 2-week in jail time just for looking at the city from an abandoned building. We wait, but we probably shouldn't have waited on the roof. We get the all clear from my friend to come back down, and we head to the ladder. My friend goes first, and our flashlight dies. The ladder is tricky to get onto when you can't see it, and it's missing some rungs. So I come down very slowly in the dark, afraid of hurting myself. I hop down, and my friend tells me very quietly that he hears someone in the room next to us. I shrug it off. We already know there's people in the building. Then the screaming starts. At first, it almost sounded like one of my friends waiting outside yelling my name. I hesitate at the top of the stairs. Just outside of the door, the room screaming is coming from. I try to decide if it was him, or if maybe he's just playing some sort of prank. The guy I came inside the building with grabs my wrist, and we start running down the stairs. At this point, it's obvious that it's not my friend. It is just guttural, intense screaming. We start running down the stairs, and then hear really loud banging to go along with the screaming. It sounds like this guy has a very heavy object that he's swinging at the walls and exposed pipes with. There's only one flight of stairs, because every other way down is out of order freight elevators. So we're trapped inside the stairwell. And it is 10 flights of stairs until we reach the ground floor. And then have to book it to the opposite side of the factory and back out the hole we climbed through. Besides screaming and swinging the heavy object, we now hear him barreling down the stairs behind us. He is at least one floor behind. Whatever he's using to hit the walls and the pipes is clearly enough to do some damage to our skulls, because a bit of brick chipped off the wall and followed us down the steps, and that's when my friend grabbed my wrist again and throws me through the nearest door. We've only made it down 3 floors, and at the beginning of each flight of the stairs, there's one door that opens up onto an entire level. In other words, it is painfully obvious where we've gone. After running inside this room, we notice it has been gutted like every other floor. But more of the windows are boarded up, and it's very dark. All that's in the room to hide behind are some pillars. We get behind one, huddled together. This guy stops outside the doorway to the room we are in, and he's still screaming. It's terrifying. He then starts swinging his weapon around and slamming it into the door frame. We're sure he's going to come in, and the only way out is the door he's currently standing in. Neither of us can pluck up the courage to even look around the pillar to see the guy, and we have no idea what kind of weapon he has. Nearly 4 minutes pass, and he still has not stopped screaming. For whatever reason, he doesn't come into the room we are in. Starts again running down the stairs. He's still hitting pipes in the walls along the way. We just wait. We have 7 floors to go down still, and we could pass him in any doorway on the way down. Eventually the screaming and banging stops, but we still think we should wait. That's when we hear something from a different corner of our room. This is just enough light from a window in the back that hasn't been boarded up, and we see a figure get up off the floor. This person has been in the room with us the entire 7 or 8 minutes we've been in here, and they haven't let on until now. This person, who is in front of the only light source, so we totally see a black figure, is now shuffling towards us without making a sound. It's exactly like a zombie movie, and we run. We don't bother to find out what this person's deal is, and temporarily forget about the first and more clearly dangerous guy. For an asthmatic, I hauled ass down those stairs, and never paused to catch my breath, not even once. As we are reaching the bottom of the stairwell, the screaming starts again. It's coming from the room next to us, but we do not stop running. The hole in the wall that we climbed through to get inside the building is yards away, and this man comes crashing out of the room behind us. We never look back and climb through the hole so fast I barely remember doing it. Our 2 friends are waiting for us, and we throw ourselves into the car. They ask what happened, because apparently that man was so loud they could hear him screaming and breaking things from outside the building. They thought we were the ones making all that noise, and we're going to give it a few minutes before calling us to remind us that the police were still in the area, patrolling for the drunk underage college students. and we should probably shut the fuck up. We tell them what happened, and then decided to carry on with our plans for the night because a beer was totally necessary after all that. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, and you can also stalk me on Instagram. All these links are below. Thanks again for listening to this episode, guys. I hope you like it. I think I did a urban exploration episode before, but this one's definitely better. A lot better stories, a lot better quality, all that, all that good stuff. So, not sure when the next episode's going to come out. More than likely, it'll probably be Saturday, Sunday. Probably somewhere right around there. Yeah, ideally, that's when it's coming out. And that is probably going to be the big one. Well, I don't know if it's going to be big, but the different one that you're going to either like or you're not going to like. So, I'm excited for it. I think there's going to be a decent amount of people that are going to enjoy it. So fingers crossed you guys will be along for the ride regardless. But in any case, I think that's all I got. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Cheers.